All right, so I have my final Bristol paper that I'm gonna print on, my thicker Bristol board paper. You could do watercolor paper, whatever you have. I have my mood board and my composition thumbnails handy. I also did a test that I always do, especially before I'm gonna film something, but I always, when I make paintings, make at least 2 or 3 of them. And the first one is really a lot of working stuff out. And then I used a lot of Sharpie to make changes, and I was just testing colors and stuff. So I learned a lot from this one. I don't like the way it looks at all, which is fine, but you got to make a lot of bad paintings before you can make some good ones. So don't be afraid to make bad paintings. So what I'm gonna do, what I do like though, is that I taped around the edges, and I think that always looks really nice and gives it more like of a finished feeling. So I'm gonna tape this up to give myself a composition layout. And just make sure you overlap on the edges so you get clean edges there. Okay. Get all 4 down, and then I'm going to draw my composition in pencil, but I am being careful since I picked out some of the colors. I know I'm using yellow, which can be really transparent, and I don't want to add white to it. I'm going to do gradient, so I know there's going to be transparency in this part. That's why I just instinctively, while I was drawing, wrote yellow there. So I'm not going to draw these lines because I know that the pencil might show through. So that's why it's important to plan this stuff out, because then it could get muddy, or the paint could pick up the graphite in the pencil, and that can make you unhappy. All right, so I'm looking at my, sometimes I'll do this and just look at my, the one that I chose, so I'm not distracted by everything else. So I know I need the space for the lettering, and I want to make sure to give myself enough space, so I'm going to work that out first. And I'm kind of looking, it's like almost going to half. And you can erase the lines that you don't want there. So I'm just really getting my big shapes down. And then, let's see, I want these 2 to maybe be a little more rounded. And so here's another triangle. And then I think I want this to be like, looking like they're more layered. And then I'm gonna start having it come, like the background, come into the more straight lines. I think I have one more here that I want. So like these straighter lines are going to be the blue in the background, and then I know this is all going to be sky. I think that maybe that's too much sky. So I'm just going to bring this up a little more and up like that, and erase the ones that I don't want. And then, you know, this is making a triangle shape too, or like an arrow pointing down. Let's see. So you can always be refining. I think that looks pretty good, except now here it feels like we have some empty space. So I might do that. Okay. And I am erasing just so I don't have a lot of see through because I know I'm going to be doing some gradients. All right, now I want to do the lettering in here. So you definitely want to draw that out. And I want to give it enough space. So I'm starting with, like I said, when I was drawing it, the bones, the skeleton, just the simple straight lines. And then I'm going to build off of that. So now that I'm looking at it bigger, I think I want the feet to go in the direction of the line here. Let's see how that looks. Maybe it goes like that. That might be kind of fun. And so let your ideas change and evolve as you're working. You know, if you have something that you think might look better than your drawing, you're not, you know, restricted by anything. This is your painting and your illustration. You can make changes as you want. And, you know, you just want to make sure that these are, depending on how big your brushes are, that these letters are big enough to be able to paint in. You don't want to make them too small. That's why I'm saying you only have to have at least 2 letters, because painting letters is very hard and this is the first time you're trying it. So be nice to yourself and don't go too overboard with it. Maybe I'll make this go this way too. And it could have maybe a little highlight on there. I feel like it needs a little foot on the top. I don't know. I'm just making this stuff up as I go. And I do want to give them some space from the edge. I don't know about the second exclamation point. I think we'll see how that goes. Okay, so that's all I'm doing for the drawing setup. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is start to paint the background. Okay, so I'm gonna start painting the background of each section first. I'm going to do gradients, which you're going to want to include in your project. So I'll show you how to do gradients, and I'm going to tape up the sky since these are straight lines, and I don't really want that color. This is going to be like yellow, red, orange for a sunset, and then these are going to be blue. So I do want a little bit of a separation, and then I can paint some of the blue over the edge of the yellow. But I also just want to show you this technique that if you have really different colors and you don't want them bleeding into each other, you can tape it up right on your painting. And when I'm taping stuff on my painting, I do this art teacher trick, which is just going like this on the sticky side of the tape to make it a little less sticky. You don't have to buy expensive tape. This is just regular old masking tape, but you can give yourself a little bit of an easier time pulling it up. And then I just kind of tamp it down on the side I know I'm gonna be painting up against. And I do leave a little bit of this to pull it easily when it's on the actual painting itself. On the edges, I don't care as much. And I'm just like measuring it sort of and doing my art teacher trick to remove some of the adhesive. It's also fun. Maybe it's ASMR. And I want to cover up the pencil because I'm doing a gradient, which is going to have transparency and yellow, and I don't want the pencil to show through. You could also erase it. Like there's this line here is kind of bothering me, so just want to make sure that all gets covered up. And you could erase the whole thing now that I know where it's going to go. Some people tape their whole paintings and do a lot of really fun work with taping. So you can also you can rip the edge. Well, maybe I'll do that. Uh-oh, I'm experimenting while I'm filming, which is never good. You could rip the edge of it, of the tape, and make kind of mountain shape. Let's see, we'll see how it goes. We can always paint over it, which is what I love about gouache. So I just ripped this little piece off, and then it creates, instead of a straight edge, you can create a more nuanced edge, which actually can look really cool and save you some time. So I'm just putting some pressure on there, but leaving this so I can pull it up slowly when it's dry. Okay, so I'm just using yellow and red to make my sunset, keeping it simple. Oh, I think that was the wrong red. Well, I'm getting the other red. We can try both. And remember, what's great about gouache is you can always paint over stuff. If you don't like the way a color looks, you can paint over it. And since we're working in these shape sections, you can really think about what each color will be, where you want your gradients. We're really focusing on gradient and texture in this project. So I'll show you how to do gradients and a couple different ways to do texture. So I'm using a big brush, a big flat brush. You can obviously use whatever you want. And for the gradient, I'm going to get the paper wet first. I'm actually gonna start upside down. And I'll have like the orange here as if the sun has already set, and then move to a lighter yellow on the top. So I'm getting this whole section just with clear water, clean water, and I'm making sure this whole paper is damp. And so I'm just kind of smoothing it around. You can also, some people do this with a sponge, which is kind of fun. So you can have like a sponge and squeeze it out and then get the whole paper wet. I'm actually going to mix with a smaller brush and get that a little wet so I can make sure I'm getting the colors that I want. I'm gonna take half the yellow, and red really takes over, so I'm putting the yellow in here to mix it, and I'm just dabbing a little bit of red, and we are definitely gonna need more yellow here. I also wanna see what the other red does. I think this is this yellow, and I do have another yellow color in here that I might experiment with, just to see. It's never a waste of time to experiment with mixing colors. Get my rag, my old t-shirt. Whenever I have a t-shirt that has too many holes in it, I wash it and then cut it up into pieces to use as rags. And what's good about really old t-shirts is they're not as like linty if you've worn them a lot. So they're pretty good for painting. Okay, let's see what this one looks like. Oh, that's kind of a nice color. Maybe that was the right red to use. I think I like that better than that. Let me get the glare over here a little better. Okay. So my paper is wet. I have some colors mixed, and then I added more of the yellow, and there's other colors I can pull from as I'm doing my gradient. So I'm gonna go from orange to yellow. My brush is wet. I'm gonna take this orange in my brush, and I did want this to be like a little, like this kind of lines. So I'm adding the paint, and then I'm adding a little more water. So the paper's wet, and then I'm adding more water to mix it. So I really want you to try mixing up a gradient using wet paint. I'm gonna add a little more. I think it needs to get, I want it to be kind of dramatic on the edges here. And see how you can pull it out from where you put the paint in. And this feels like it needs a little more water. So you can do a gradient of just one color getting dark to light, or you can do a gradient of like multiple colors changing. And I'm using my brush strokes to kind of give it that curved line feeling that I had drawn. So I'm just doing this, and I do want to have it a little more dramatic from down here. So I'm using different directions in my brush stroke to kind of pull this color up, and then I'm gonna get my brush wet again and smooth it out. So try going in different directions, and I can see brush strokes here that I don't love. So I'm gonna get my color down the way I want it. I want some more yellow over here. And I'm gonna smooth it all in with my brush. And then I want to get a little more pink down here. I'm gonna pull it up this direction and then smooth it going in the other direction. Now, this is what I want it to look like in terms of the colors being in the right place, but I don't love the bands. You might like that, and that could be what you want. But if you don't want it, so feel free to leave it. You can take a paper towel and you're both adding texture, which this can start to look like clouds. This is just a regular old paper towel, and it can also help you blend. So I love texture. I probably do too much of it, but I think it looks cool and it's fun. So I'm just dabbing with this paper towel, and then I can get a clean edge. And you can use, you know what's fun is that like tissue paper is good for this, because it's like a little more light, and so there's a lot more sort of edges to it. You can try different kinds of paper, but paper towel is great too, especially this one has some texture already on it. So you can add as much or little of that as you want, but make sure to try out the gradient of either one color, or you can mix a couple colors. You can do a lot. Now you need to let this dry before pulling up the tape. So take a break and we'll see how it looks when it's dry. Okay, so while I waited for this to dry, I cleaned my palette, cleaned my brushes, just rinse my brushes off, and I'm gonna rip off this to see how it came out. So I'm just pulling from the corner and slowly, that actually looks really cool. Of course I went over it, typical of me. So you could do this over other colors too. I would just say if you're gonna tape over an existing paint color, be careful because the paper is already, I don't know what the word would be for it, but it's already gotten wet and it's maybe not as strong. Like the fibers of the paper wouldn't be as strong as if it was just dry paper that hadn't been touched. So that's where you can kind of get into ripping stuff, and that can be frustrating, is if I were to put more tape on top of here. So I generally don't do that, but some people do with good results. Might need fancy tape for that. So now I'm gonna do these two sections in blue, because as we see stuff in the distance, it gets more blue and fades. So I'm doing gradients in all these sections as well. Gradients are awesome, and I want you to have good practice with it. So I'm gonna put down my two types of blue that I have, and I'm gonna do a gradient to get it lighter just with water and see what happens. I'm not sure what'll happen on the edges here, but I'm interested to know. So instead of using white, which you could use white, I'm using the transparency of adding water. I do want to erase these because I am gonna use transparency here on the edges. I like to get rid of the pencil lines. And you can always just, I can lighten them up a little bit too. Sometimes the erasers takes up paint. But if not, I can get a clean part of a paper towel and see if I can get some of that up. I think I'll be able to cover it, but just in case this happens to you. Yeah, look, I just dipped some paper towel in water and you can at least lighten it a lot. And then I'm gonna try drying it off. So there's some erasing for you. So there's not really any mistakes you can make with this because you can erase. I always go too hard. I'm always ripping paper. So don't feel bad if you rip paper. These fibers have come undone, but that's okay. Oh man, I really like the way that looks. I'm afraid I'm gonna mess it up right now, but we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm gonna use a smaller brush. I'm gonna use this flat brush and round brush to get this gradient going. But first, I'm gonna get the paper wet. I always forget about that part. So I'm just wetting the section that I want to use, and that will help me control the paint because the paint will hopefully do what I want and stay in the section that I've made wet. And you can use a smaller brush to go up to the edges and just smooth the water out. Okay, so dark where it's towards the bottom, light where it's towards the sky is what I'm looking for. And I'm gonna add a lot of, I'm mixing the two blues. I don't know why. You can use what's coming out of the tube too. Here we go. So I'm adding the paint to where I want it to be darkest, and then I'm gonna fade it out from there. So I'm gonna add a little more paint here. So you're putting the paint, you're starting the paint on where you want the gradient to be darkest. And your gradient doesn't always have to go from dark to light. It can gradate from one color to the other. And then I'm just adding water to my brush on the paint that's on the paper that's already wet. And I'm pulling out this color. Now these are gonna look, this is gonna look like sky too, but maybe I can add a little more green to make it look, or purple to make it look like mountains. Oh, that's looking okay. I think I'm gonna try not to overdo it here on the edge. But maybe if I put a little bit more color, it's gonna even accentuate that. Okay, so now I used the paper towel way too aggressively here, and we can see what's happening. This happens all the time to me. And I'm gonna make it a Bob Ross happy accident. And since we're doing texture in this painting anyway, I'm going to go with it. And you can use the paper towel to do texture, of course, but if you're willing to get your hands a little dirty, you can use this part of your hand, and that makes really awesome textures. You can use your knuckles. It just makes cool textures. I don't know why. Someone probably did it by accident once. I didn't make this up. Another teacher showed me. And then, you know, this doesn't have to be the final look of your section. You can let it dry and keep adding more to it, because I think this actually is going to need a little green to make sure people understand that it is mountains and not the sky, because I think that might be a little confusing. So let's see here. Try to get a blue-green. There, I don't think the sky looks like that color. So you can just keep on going and get your gradients looking the way you want. Add some texture, just adding water. Adding water to smooth it out. And then adding more pigment, more paint, where I want it to be kind of more solid, less transparent, more opaque. So I'm just using my wet brush to kind of smooth out this transition from the green to the blue. And when my brush gets too much pigment on it, I just add a little more water and I just come in and I can pull up, I'm gonna be able to pull up some of these paper fibers. So don't worry if that happens to yours. I'm gonna try my hand thing again, just to get some texture in there, and to kind of match the other side. And when it dry, I'm gonna wait till this section dries, if this happens on your paper, to clean it up a little bit. All right, now I'm gonna move on to these. These three sections will be where the trees are. So the trees I'm going to have be yellow and orange and red for fall colors. So I do want the background of them to be dark, similar to the pattern project. I want to paint really vibrant, bright colors against a dark background. So these are mountains fading into the back, and I'm going to keep the color I have on here, but start to add burnt umber and maybe some black to darken it up so that the colors on top of it, once it dries, will really pop. And if it's fall, everything's turning brown, so that helps. All right, I'm gonna mix this brown into here, maybe into here too. And again, I forgot to wet this section of the paper that I'm gonna use. So this brush, I think, is clean. And I'm gonna do this section first. I'm gonna now do one section at a time, which you could be doing this whole time if you wanted. I'm not worried about erasing the pencils because this is gonna start to get much darker as it goes down. So let's see how this color looks. Ooh, I had a lot of water on there and that actually looks really cool. I love when that happens. So you can really play with what's happening with your paint, but that was too brown. It's a shame, but I'm gonna paint over that because I need it to fit. I need it to fit in with the other sections. But you can intentionally make that happen, or you can have your Bob Ross happy accident moments, which are always amazing. Okay, there's a lot of water on here, so I'm just gonna move it around. And I'm gonna kind of go with my paintbrush. I want to go with the form of this shape. And I do think it needs a little more blue just for this transition to make sense from these mountains to the mountains that are a little closer. I don't want it to look so separate. And I'm gonna use my paper towel to just do a little blending and get some of the texture. And I often do this in a lot of layers. Like I'll let this dry with the texture and then you can do sort of another gradient over it. It's gonna pick up some of the paint, but oh, this got too light. So I'm just gonna place in a little bit of pigment here to get it looking the way I want. And I think I need to clean up this a little bit. And you can make yours a lot more solid and darker. And in fact, for the next two, I'm gonna fill it in with a lot more of a solid shape of this blue-green. So I'm gonna get the paper only very slightly wet, not too much water. I might even take the paper towel, or if you have a sponge, and just keep it a little bit damp in here, not soaking wet the way I've had the other ones for the gradients. I just want it to help me move the paint around, and it's okay. I'm not worried about it being, my paintbrush not being clean, because I am gonna add a much darker color here. So I'm always thinking about, you know, what the paper, the amount of water the paper has on it, and the amount of water my paint and paintbrush have on it, and what that kind of look will create. So when I want it to create a more watery, far away look, I have the paper with a lot of water on it and the paint with a lot of water in it. And then as I want it to get more opaque and darker, I'm using less water on both. So there's that one section. Get more brown here. Need to get this darker. And this is gonna get covered up with a lot of trees, so I'm not too worried about it. But let's see what oh, that looks cool. And you can overlap it a little. See, this just gives it kind of a cool texture. And then you can smooth out some of the edges of that, so it's like not so perfect. And I've just let my brush dry. So there's a whole dry brush technique that also creates some great texture that you can employ. Okay, now I'm gonna get a little more, I might add more blue. A little darker, because I want it to get darker as I go down. All right, so keep going. I'm gonna keep going with this and fill it in and get it to, you know, the colors, get all the color down that I want and get it filled in. And here I'm, you know, adding a lot of color because I want it to be darker. And then I'm gonna come and smooth it out with my brush. And I am creating sort of these lines in the direction I want the shape to sort of live. So I'm creating these sections, and I might just add a little water to smooth it out. Yeah, that's looking better. So take your time, get each of your background sections working, and I'm gonna paint around the background, around the letters, wait till everything dries, and then I'll paint the letters. So there is some waiting time where you can, you know, clean your brushes, get a snack, take a break. You could do this, of course, in a couple different days. And, you know, so right now I'm just taking my time to get these sections, all the background sections filled in the way I want them to look. And I'm thinking about my edges here and maybe overlapping a little bit to make sure I get look I want, making it look maybe a little more like mountains, smoothing out some stuff. And I think this needs to be a little darker here. And this edge I would like to soften. So see, now that it's dry, or sort of dry, I can go over it and smooth it out a little more in this section. And then I just want to come up and fix these edges. All right. I think I'm going to stop for sake of getting things done, and then I'm going to fill this in.